LETTER the 37th of Life in Mexico. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Life in Mexico by Francis Calderón de la Barca. Letter the 37th. Distinguished Men. Generals Bustamante, Santa Anna and Victoria. Anecdote. Señor Pedraza. Señor Gutierrez Estrada. Count Cortina. Señor Gorostiza. Don Carlos Bustamante. Mornings in the Alameda. Don Andrés Quintana Roo. Don Lucas Alamán. General Moran. General Almonte. Señor Cañedo. Señores Neri del Barrio and Casaflores. Doctor Valentin. Don Francisco Tagle. 8 revolutions. 27th. H. in his last letter asks what distinguished men we have in Mexico, and with a tone of doubt as to their being very numerous. Distinguished in what way? As generals, as statesmen, as men of literature? It seems to me that a country where we have known Bustamante, Santa Anna, General Victoria, Posada, Gomez Pedraza, Gutierrez Estrada, Count Cortina, Gorostiza, Don Carlos Bustamante, Quintana Roo, General Moran, Don Lucas Alamán, General Almonte, Señor Cañedo, Don Francisco Tagle, Señor Neri del Barrio, Señor Fogoaga, Don José Valentin, the Count de Casaflores, etc., etc., is not so destitute of distinguished men as he supposes. The preceding are, I confess, strung together as they occur to me, without order or regularity. Soldiers, statesmen, and literary men, some on one side of politics, some on another, but all men of note, and men who have acted, or suffered, or been distinguished, in one way or another, in the revolutions of the last 32 years. And there is not one amongst those I have mentioned, who, if he were to write merely his personal history, would not by so doing write the history of these civil wars. The 3 first, as principal figures in every revolution, are already historical. Bustamante, as an honest man and a brave soldier; Santa Anna, as an acute general, active and aspiring, whose name has a prestige, whether for good or for evil, that no other possesses; General Victoria, a plain, uneducated, well-intentioned man, brave and enduring. A passage in his life is well known, which ought to be mentioned as an offset to the doubtful anecdote of the two-headed eagle. When Yturbide, alone, fallen and a prisoner, was banished from Mexico, and when General Bravo, who had the charge of conducting him to Vera Cruz, treated him with every species of indignity, Victoria, the sworn foe of the emperor during his prosperity, now, when orders were given him to see Yturbide embarked, surrounded him with attentions, and loaded him with respectful distinctions, so that Yturbide himself, moved with gratitude, after expressing his warm esteem for the general's consistent conduct, presented him with his watch as a memorial of his grateful admiration. As for Don Manuel Gomez Pedraza, he has occupied too distinguished a place in the political occurrences of this country, not to be generally known. An officer in the time of the Spanish government, he was distinguished for his severe discipline and strict moral conduct. In the time of Yturbide he was military commandant of Huasteca, and supported the emperor, who afterwards made him commander general of Mexico. In 1827 he was Minister of War during the presidency of Victoria, and was distinguished for his extraordinary activity, which quality was greatly wanting in that general. In 1828 he and Guerrero were announced as candidates for the presidency, and after a terrible political tempest, Gomez Pedraza was elected. The fermentation that succeeded, the fury of the two parties, the Guerreristas and Pedrazistas, which were mingled with Yturbidistas, was increased by the arrival of Santa Anna at Perote with 800 men, who, having shut himself up in the fortress, declared for Guerrero, and published a manifesto which set forth that general as a hero, and his rival as a hypocrite. Then came the famous revolution of the Acordada, and both Pedraza and Guerrero disappeared. Pedraza left the republic, and after another revolution, hearing that the constitution and laws were re-established, returned to Vera Cruz, but was met by an order which prohibited him from disembarking. He then set sail for New Orleans. Another change brought him back, and at this present juncture he lives in tranquillity, together with his lady, a person of extraordinary talent and learning, daughter of the licenciado, Jurisconsult, Señor Azcarate. Such are the disturbed lives passed by the children of the soil. Of Gutierrez Estrada, now far from his household gods, and languishing under unjust persecution, I have already spoken. Count Cortina is a gentleman and a scholar, a man of vast information, and a protector of the fine arts. His conversation is a series of electric sparks, brilliant as an ignis fatuus, and bewildering as a will-o'-the-wisp. I have seldom heard such eloquence even in trifles, and he writes with as much ease as he speaks. We have seen three clever pieces of his lately, showing his versatile genius, one upon earthquakes, one upon the devil, and one upon the holy fathers of the church. The first in the form of a pamphlet addressed to a lady, giving a scientific explanation of the causes of these phenomena, interspersed with compliments to her beaux yeux. The second is a burlesque poem, and the third a grave and learned dissertation. Don José Eduardo Gorostiza, though a native of Vera Cruz, is the son of a Spanish officer, and when very young went to Spain, where he was known politically as a liberal. He was distinguished as a writer of theatrical pieces, which have been and still are very popular, and those which he merely translated, he had the merit of adapting to the Spanish stage, and Castilianizing in grace and wit. One of his pieces, which we saw the other evening at the theatre, Contigo pan y cebolla, with thee, bread and onions, is delightful. Besides occupying a place in the cabinet of Mexico, he has been charge d'affaires in Holland and minister at the court of St. James. In conversation he is extremely witty and agreeable, and he has collected some good paintings and valuable books in the course of his European travels. The reputation of Don Carlos Bustamante, deputy of Oaxaca, is altogether literary. He has made many researches in Mexican antiquities, and has published a history of the discovery of America, written by Padre Vega, which was unknown before. Also the gallery of Mexican princes, Texcoco in the last days of its last kings, etc. He lately sent me his Mornings in the Alameda, a book intended to teach Mexican young ladies the history of their own country. I have read but a few pages in it, but was struck with the liberality of his remarks in regard to the Spaniards, which, coming from such a source, are so much more valuable and worthy of credit than any that can be made by a foreigner, that I am tempted to translate the passage to which I allude. The Spanish government founded colleges and academies in the reign of the wise Charles III. It established that of fine arts which it enriched with the most beautiful statues, which you can still see when you visit it. Their transportation, he says in a note, cost $70,000. He sent excellent workmen, and imitated his predecessor, Philip II, who sent to Mexico whatever could not find a place in the works of the Escurial. Of his wisdom we have proofs in those magnificent temples which attract the attention of travellers, such as the Cathedral of Mexico, San Agustin, Santo Domingo of Oaxaca, and others. Spain did no more, because she could do no more, and Spain gave to this America a constitution which the Mexicans themselves, who pride themselves most on their learning, are unacquainted with, and whose analysis was formed by the learned Padre Mir in the history of the Revolution, which he printed in London. A constitution in which are made manifest the good intentions of the Austrian monarchs, and their earnest desire to render the Indians happy, especially in the case of the great Philip IV, whose autograph law is preserved, and which I have read with respect and emotion, prohibiting the bad treatment of the Indians. In short, this America, if it were considered in a state of slavery under the Spanish dominion, was at least on a level with the peninsula itself. Read over the frightful list of taxes which oppressed the Spaniards, and compare it with those that were imposed upon us, and you will find that theirs is infinitely greater than ours. These truths being granted, remark the progress which the colonies had made in sciences and arts, and this truth which escaped from the light pen of the censor Berestein will be confirmed. Mexico, he says, was the sunflower of Spain. When in her principal universities there were no learned men to fill the mathematical chairs, Mexico could boast of Don Carlos de Sigüenza y Góngora. When in Madrid there was no one who had written a good epic poem, in Mexico the Bernardo was composed, etc., etc. The next on my list is Don Andrés Quintana Roo, the best modern poet of Mexico, a native of Yucatan, and who came to the capital when very young to study law. He is said to possess immense learning, and was enthusiastic to fanaticism in the cause of independence, insomuch that he and his wife, Doña Leona Vicario,